Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Purelite Ventures presents Consultancy in Healthcare. We are in for a treat today. We are going to talk about the ins and outs of why founders need consultancy and advisory services and who can do these things for them. So just to give you a little bit of a background about this, there are several reasons why founders in healthcare look to advisors and consultants to build their companies. First could be strategic planning. Second could be in-depth market analysis, finding out who their customers are and how to get them to know about their products and use their products. The next thing could be process optimization. And another could be regulatory compliance, because there are so many regulations that are not only state, but country, and also geographically agnostic, that need to be followed on a daily, monthly, and yearly basis and kept up with. There's also this very important thing that we've been hearing about called AI, and consultants are very well poised to help move founders into spaces where they can use AI to help enhance what they are doing and how they are helping people and making this a healthier world. Additionally, there are a couple more things they do. And this is why it's so exciting. There is almost nothing no hole that can't be filled by a founder with the proper consultant or advisor. And additionally, we'll say operational improvements. Many times they've got an MVP, but how do they complete their processing and their production of this MVP and make it widespread? There's also that very interesting thing that we have within healthcare. They're brilliant physicians, brilliant researchers, but in order to do what they do, they have to concentrate very fully on what they're doing in the scientific realm or in the tech realm. So that means that budgeting, cost analysis, and all of the finance that is important within business is sometimes missing from their skill set. Consultants and advisors can help with this, and it's so important. Another thing is partnership development. They can identify the right partners at the right times to bring into companies to help them grow and to support them. They can also help with launch support. And I think one of the most important things is having an advisor or consultant before a crisis happens, right? Because we know that, if all things do work out for good. But however, if you are not acquainted with a really great consultant or advisor before issues arise, then there'd be a mad scramble to fix that problem. Having people like Issa or Lindsey in your corner can have you set so that you might not even have those crises because they've seen it all, right? So in this particular webinar, I would like to introduce you to our extraordinary CEOs of particular advisory and consultant firms. And one is Lindsey Kratzer. She is a phenomenal advisor, and she is the founder and CEO of Spark Health Advisors. Now, Ms. Kratzer's work with Fortune 1000 employers, in combination with her up-close and personal experience with venture capital, which is pertinent to what we're doing, and private equity startups, gives her inside knowledge into the challenges that employers face on a daily basis. She has a national network of business business partners and an extensive experience set. She combines her passion for health and wellness to drive healthcare innovation, and she delivers meaningful outcomes that empower companies to better care for their people who work for them and also the people that they serve. She has an MBA in finance from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville and is also a member of She's Independent Investments. So please welcome Miss Lindsey Kratzer. Hi, Lindsey.
Hi, Nana. Thank you so much for having me today.
It is such a pleasure to have you. You're very welcome. And we have with us today Mr. Issa Kildani. He is the founder and principal consultant of Ambrosia Ventures. It's a strategic consulting and M&A advisory firm, and it specializes in guiding life sciences and healthcare companies through the maze of regulatory challenges, market expansions, and their transformational growth. He was also awarded by the Life Sciences Review a spot in the top life sciences consulting providers of June 2024. So that is a huge accomplishment, and it just happened. So you guys, he's fresh off the presses here. And he's had over 8 years of project management, regulatory affairs, R&D, quality assurance, impact, and experience. And he's also worked with Janssen, AbbVie, Medtronic. He is also known for his love of AI and how he's able to integrate it into what he offers his clients to help them grow faster and stronger. He is an advisory council member at the Harvard Business Review. He's a director of commercialization at MetaBrain Labs, and he has a master's degree from GVSU in biomedical sciences. Please welcome Mr. Issa Kildani to Purelite Ventures Presents. Hi, Issa.
Hi, Nana. Yeah, thank you so much. It's a true honor to be here.
Oh, you're very welcome, and thank you. It is my honor. It is my honor. So I'd like to jump into some questions. I think that we are in for a treat because some of these questions I have been battling with myself. And so I'm sure that there are other people who would like to get the answers to them as well. I'd like to quickly also introduce Miss Callie Estraker, and she is a fellow at Purelite Ventures, and she will be helping me to moderate today's event. Welcome, Callie.
Hi, thanks for having me as always. Hi, everyone.
All right. So our first question I would like to ask is about how your origin stories. So I will ask you first, Issa, how did you gravitate towards consultancy within healthcare? And what inspires you in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it started as I was a researcher by trade here. So, I really gravitated to healthcare consulting because it really offered a unique intersection of, scientific innovation, patient impact, and strategic problem solving. So, working within the life sciences and healthcare, it really allows me to bridge that gap between groundbreaking scientific discoveries and the business decisions that really shape how innovations reach patients. Because, at the end of the day, that's what we really aim for, So helping companies define their product strategies, navigate regulatory hurdles, and ultimately improve patient outcomes really has struck me as profound work and profound and meaningful work. So I guess the second part of that question on what really inspires me is this sector's really unwavering momentum towards positive change. We are always seeing constant new therapeutic modalities, digital health solutions, and just new and innovative data-driven approaches to treatment that are just constantly reshaping that landscape. So just the opportunity to guide those clients through these developments, helping them understand the evolving market dynamics, form partnerships, refine their clinical approaches, it really feels like you're contributing to a broader vision of healthcare advancement, and not just locally, but of course, on a global scale. So each engagement really reaffirms our work that isn't just advising on business strategies. It's about improving the quality of life for individuals and hopefully globally as well. So the greater purpose really keeps me driven, energized, and gets me committed to staying active in that space.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And I would also like to pose the same question to Lindsey.
Yeah, absolutely. So, similar to Isa, I've spent, the majority of my career working in healthcare. But personally, I have a passion for health, wellness, fitness. I've benefited from so many things within that world in my life. And so, the ability to drive better outcomes for really the rest of certainly the country and the world is certainly, a wonderful mission for all of us to have within healthcare. Furthermore, like I just really enjoy working with founders And I think that we've kind of learned over the course of, the few years that we've been in business that the employer space that, can mean, employers, but really that whole ecosystem that surrounds them is a bit of a foreign language for many people who have spent their careers in healthcare. So it's been very fun to work with, innovative companies that are doing really cool things within healthcare and lend our expertise to help them really grow with kind of a new audience that they maybe don't have as much in-house experience with.
That is fantastic. I love it. And I love that you guys are working within the same field, but that you're very complementary with each other. And I'd like to explore that a little bit more. But first, I would like to know, Lindsey, how does healthcare consultancy influence the venture capital ecosystem in your eyes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, venture capital firms are looking, for multiple different things. So they're obviously looking for kind of the talent to support their portfolio companies. They're looking to really maximize, revenue within those portfolio companies. And then, make sure that there is kind of that market potential. So that's how we tend to help from a venture capital perspective. So working with companies, that are with venture capital firms that are looking to go after, that have portfolio companies that are looking to go after employers, we can kind of lend that that expertise because, I think that venture capital firms are oftentimes looking for consultants to be kind of thought leaders and experts within their space, obviously. And they're oftentimes, a bit more generalist. So they need kind of those experts to come in with kind of that knowledge, but then also ideally with kind of the processes and the talent and kind of the team to help take their portfolio companies to the next level. So that's one of the things that we do to support that ecosystem.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I'd like to also pose the same question to Issa.
Yeah, absolutely. Lindsey made a great point on how consultants really help bridge the gap for thought leadership. So I was going to just expound on that a little bit and add a few other points to how we, Ambrosia Ventures really contributes to that VC ecosystem. So, consultants, we bring a lot of specialized industry knowledge that's going to help VCs make a lot more informed decision-making skills on their investment decisions. So we almost enhance their due diligence process. So whether it's validating a startup's clinical data to assessing their regulatory pathways, competitive landscapes, we want to make sure that any potential investments are thoroughly vetted. So that's a lot of what we do. So I think this thorough vetting process, it avoids any costly mistakes, any pitfalls, and identifies startups that have a genuine chance of advancing patient care and producing favorable returns in an investor's perspective. And to parlay that really, I think another key aspect of what we do is helping spot any emerging trends and technology with investors. As consultants, a lot of what we do is we are adapt to certain local insights and to different geographic markets that probably other venture capitalists aren't aware of. So we are aware of a lot of the evolving care models, all the new therapies that are emerging, any shifts in patient behavior. We want to be able to alert those investors to those emerging areas of any opportunities. So it could be anything from novel gene editing techniques or a digital health platform that's going to optimize chronic care or chronic disease management. We want to make sure that we're helping the VC stay ahead of the curve, ensuring that their portfolios are well positioned.
That is fantastic, actually, because I will tell you this, as a VC, it is very important for me to make sure that my due diligence is strong and to have partners that are also looking in the same direction as me is very, very important. So I love that. I love that you guys are forward looking and you're always looking for innovation and how that innovation can be helpful. Wonderful. So then the next question that I would like to ask you guys is what do you think the right timing would be for a founder to decide to work with you? And I think, Issa, I would like to start with you on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so since we're a strategic advisory, founders typically reach out when they hit a point of a strategic complexity that's going to exceed any internal bandwidth that they have or expertise. So it's usually a really critical inflection point in the company's journey. So this could be if they're about to embark on clinical trials and they need to navigate regulatory nuances, whether they're preparing for a major funding round and they want to validate their value proposition with robust market insights, or they're gearing up for commercialization or looking to position their product for any sort of exit strategy, whether it be licensing or an acquisition or merger opportunity. So I think a common catalyst that we want to be able to recognize is that it's extremely tight in the healthcare industry. So if a founder feels like they could benefit from a seasoned guidance, whether it's refining that clinical development strategy, streamlining their go-to-market strategy, or their approach, that's the time to consider bringing in an outside expert. So really, if a founder is at a crossroads with, where informed decision-making is, prominent, they want to make sure that you want to have accelerated execution, and strategy clarity is going to be vital to their growth. That's the best time to engage with someone like us.
That's really interesting because I also sometimes feel as though having a consultant, not necessarily on retainer, but possibly, could also be a wise decision because people don't know when they're going to come up against these different things that you just mentioned. So is that something also that you would consider, like being on retainer for a founder, for a startup, or is it always a situation where when the issue comes up, you usually then find the founder knocking on your door?
No, absolutely. Our recommended approach is always retainer, just because they should feel safe that they have us at bay. They know that they have that connection, that advice that we're going to be giving to them for the long road. So we try to form it as more of a partnership rather than just project by project basis. We want to make them feel like we have a connection to what they believe in or what they are trying to achieve. So that's usually how we like to engage, especially with, when we're having a retainer. You have that ad hoc. A lot of the founders, they have tons of questions, and of course, they're not going to have all the questions prepared and ready to go when a consultant's ready to come in, or they're ready to bring in a consultant. So ideally, yes, retainer does work, but of course, a lot of situational factors kind of delay that possibility.
Yes, I would love to also thank you about that, Issa. I'd also like to bring Lindsey on to answer the same question about when consultancy would be important in terms of moving forward.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we are a little bit unique in that we really focus on, helping companies grow within the self-funded employer market. So we typically work with companies, when they have a product that, is within a few months of being able to bring to market. But we also work with more established companies. So we have everything from seed stage companies to public companies that we've worked with. And the real, kind of differentiator is that, again, they're looking to grow within that self-funded employer market. So for, kind of an earlier stage company, they may, think that there could be an opportunity to grow within employers as kind of part of their payer strategy. So we can help them kind of identify if there's a market opportunity there and certainly build a plan to do that. For some of the later stage companies, they may, already be selling to employers or have a successful business where they're working with more of the fully insured populations or health systems and want to pivot to employers. So we oftentimes work with those companies to develop out those strategies and really kind of identify new revenue streams within kind of the employer ecosystem again. And we think of employer ecosystem as beyond just employers. So it'd be employers, brokers, third-party administrators, the carrier ASO books. So we really think more broadly in terms of what that employer ecosystem could look like, including partnerships as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you for that. And I love the clarification about the timing in which you would come on board with a particular founder. So it looks to me, and actually it is that working first, for instance, with Issa, for instance, at Ambrosia, would be how this whole process would start. And then eventually your company, Spark Health Advisors, would be able to work in another section with the payers and employees. So that's
Yeah,
really very
absolutely.
important.
Yeah, I think it could be very complementary. So it could be a nice packaging, because we would typically come in a little bit later than Issa would. So again, once you're ready to actually commercialize and go after specific channels is when we would typically work with a client.
Love it. Love it. I'm also very curious about how you perceive FDA approvals and moving through this particular, I would call it these deep waters of FDA approval, because there are so many there's so many pitfalls that one could fall into when going for FDA approval, and some mistakes that are very costly, which could cause the FDA to shut it down even before it gets to an IND inflection point. So this question in particular is for you, Issa. Can you talk a little bit about how a founder and their startup should approach this and how you would help them with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the FDA approval process, it isn't a, one size fits all journey. So the, exact path, it really depends on the type of product. So whether it's a drug, biologic, or medical device. So, generally the process involves several core steps that's designed to, ensure safety, efficacy, and quality before that product reaches patients. But, on a high level, it really just depends on, one aspect would be just preclinical research. So, before you start involving humans, you want to make sure that innovators are gathering the initial data on safety, potential efficacy through your in vitro experiments and in animal models. And, you want to make sure that you have those positive preclinical data that's supporting to move on to the next stage. So from there, that's where we start, investigating whether you need an IND or an investigational new drug application or an investigational device exemption, IDE application. So that's where we go through that process, and then slowly we trickle down to the clinical trial data and then regulatory submission. So ascertaining if we need to do an NDA, BLA, PMA, and then follow, just being proactive with FDA on any Q submissions or any following submissions that they might need accordingly. And then, of course, when there's a decision that's made, we're there for them to help them gain clarity. And then from there, the most important part as well, especially for medical devices too, the post-market surveillance. So making sure that there's some sort of iterative process, if there's any adjustments to any real-world data performance or any other commitments that you might see from there.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you very, very much. I'd also like to ask you a little bit about go-to-market and commercialization initiatives, Lindsey. We'll also ask you about that as well, Issa. But first, let's come to you about that.
So how we could support a company in their go-to-market efforts? Is that the question?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, again, we focus on the employer market. So if you think, kind of broadly about payers, there's going to be the private insurers, there's going to be government, and then there's going to be the self-insured employer market. That covers about 156 million Americans. So many companies, may identify this as a target market that they want to go after. And so what we do is we have kind of a program with over the course of 90 days, we work with a company to really optimize their commercial efforts to go after that market. And to do that, we identify, kind of new revenue streams for them within the employer space. So maybe they're already working with employers, what can they do differently to kind of optimize their efforts? Or maybe it's a brand new space, what's kind of going to be the lowest barrier of entry for them? So we work to do that type of work. We also work with them to kind of position themselves for success within this market as a differentiated offering. So within the space that we work in, it's very crowded. There's a lot of point solutions. So it's challenging to kind of stand out in this marketplace. So, having a brand and a story and a value proposition and ROI that's differentiated in this market is really important. And then we have a whole host of playbooks, talent, and team to really kind of help the companies execute as well. So what we've found and what we've learned with working with startups and different founders is that a lot of them, want the expertise certainly from a consultant, and they need, some of the strategic planning work, but then they also need people that will roll up their sleeves and execute. So we've tried to build our model where we can do both and kind of parallel process things for companies.
Well, that's really interesting. Thank you for that. And I'd like to ask a little bit about geopolitical issues. Now, I know that you work mostly in the U.S., Lindsey, and I know that Issa works in the U.S. and he works abroad. So I would like to first pose this question to you, Issa. How does the geopolitical landscape fit into your framework? And what have you put in place to sort of help you to help companies go to market in the States? Because, when I go on to my calls with different founders, even though I am very specific and I invest mostly in the United States based on my own experience here and knowing a lot about quality control, quality assurance, and HIPAA and everything that goes alongside it. There are companies in Switzerland, in England, all over the world that would like to come here and go to market. So how do you work that? Because of course, things change when you cross borders.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can probably give you two different perspectives. So the U.S. companies that want to go abroad, and then the abroad companies coming to the U.S. So they have two different stances, really. So it really just depends on the founder's target markets, their product type, and their growth trajectory. That's kind of where we start for both perspectives, really. When we're looking at startups in the U.S., we want to make sure that they use the U.S. as a launch pad. They should be able to leverage the regulatory pathways that they know already. There's a strong investor ecosystem here in the U.S. as well. So like this, home market approach is more of a controlled environment, and it really just helps validate any clinical commercial assumptions. That way you can build onto that. So you can use the international expansion with a strategic lens. Now, if you want to flip it and look vice versa on companies, say that you're coming from Switzerland or the UKs of the world, that they want to get into the US markets, this is where we would have to change the lens a bit, where we look at EU, for example, for regulatory harmonization under the CE mark. And then if say that we want to ensure that their CE mark is going to be applicable to any FDA requirements. So, a lot of European clients that we have, they have a lot of promise and a lot of positive data, a lot of revenue sales in Europe, which is always a positive indication for a successful US launch. So we want to make sure we take those into consideration, any cultural factors, local healthcare deliveries. We want to make sure anything is going to affect and fluctuate any adoption and patient engagement rates. So we take those into consideration. For example, any geopolitical risks that we might see. So like, for example, in the EU, we have the MDR and the IVDR. So that's always evolving, those mandates and directives. And of course, the evolving reimbursement frameworks at IPAC. So those are always going to alter market dynamics. So we try to make that into our strategic foundation and assess accordingly.
Really wonderful. Thank you for that. It's very, very important, and it can be very, very tricky to cross borders. But at the same time, not all innovation happens in the United States. And some of the most important initiatives that we have come from abroad. And so we need to be open and receptive to those companies that want to really work in the United States and who are really seeking this particular market. So I have another question about, it's a very important question for VCs. This is about the exit, IPO, and M&A ecosystems that power venture capital. Now, many founders, when they're looking at their companies, aren't always thinking about that, but venture capitalists are always thinking about that. So I would love to hear a little bit from both of you about your views on that and how you guys help startups to move towards that prized exit, that prized IPO, that markup even between their stages. So Lindsey, I'd love it if you would start.
Sure, happy to. Well, I think that we contribute in a few different areas. So, obviously to have a successful exit, you have to show revenue growth. So oftentimes, as mentioned, companies may have started off going to market targeting, other segments within the healthcare industry. So perhaps they have a robust, health system business or commercial payer business, but they haven't done anything in the employer world. So I think, again, kind of helping them to kind of think through how you can grow your revenue streams and show really strong revenue performance is an area that we oftentimes work with companies to help just to really identify, maybe what are some gaps that they're not doing currently, and how could they build a plan to overperform in those areas as well. Obviously, you also need to be a market leader in order to have a strong exit. And part of that is your story that you're telling. So we also work with companies to really kind of evaluate their overall story and their positioning and to kind of help tweak that as well. So that's a great other opportunity. And then I'd also say, tailwinds, trends. So, a lot of the time venture capitalists will originally be looking for, investments that, have kind of that market opportunity. So we can get help on the front end, but then also, how do you, establish yourself as a thought leadership where you're really kind of driving some of those trends. So we work with companies on that as well. So those would be a few areas.
I love that. I love what you just said about like driving that ecosystem, whatever they are in, whatever their competitive landscape is, to become a leader in that, because that's what we are always looking for when we're looking to invest in a company. So Issa, yes, I would love it if you would talk a little bit about that complexity in navigating exits, M&A, IPO opportunities, and even markups.
Yeah, absolutely. So we take a very holistic step-by-step approach. So, first we really begin by assessing each startup's clinical pipeline, regulatory trajectory, and then market positioning to determine whether an IPO or some sort of strategic scale is the best path forward. So what we know today is that biopharma capital inflows, they've risen by 25% year over year, which means that new funds are being raised through either venture capital investments, public stock offerings, private placements, or partnerships that are being injected fresh capital into those companies. So it's enabling them to fund research, development, expansion, any other strategic initiative. And we're also seeing, I think in Q4 alone, there's been 6.5 billion that's raised, a little lower than what the norm has been in previous years, about 10 to 12 billion in the quarter. But that just tells us there's fresh capital in the market right now, and it's very selective. So what we do with that, we help companies refine their investor narratives. We align their developmental milestones with the IPO window, and we ensure that they have, governance and frameworks in place to meet those stringent investor criteria. For potential acquisitions, we want to make sure we leverage our network and insights to connect startups with large pharma who currently are facing a lot of patent cliffs, are actively seeking the pipeline enhancing assets. What are some of the hot topics right now are like in oncology, rare diseases, the metabolic GLP-1s of the world, and the gene therapies as well. So by integrating those data-driven insights into our guidance, we ensure that startups are entering the market with a very tailored and compelling proposition that's going to resonate with both the investors and, of course, strategic buyers. So that's a little bit on the exit and IPO end of it, but I can get a little bit into the M&A world. where it's a little bit more convoluted a bit. So, which requires us to take that added step-by-step approach, clearly defining their strategic objectives. I think in 2024, this year, the global life sciences M&A deal value, it surpassed 120 billion. So this is more of a cautious approach that's really guiding the landscape. That's the kind of characteristic right now. And another trend we're seeing is that nearly 40% of transactions, they're involving milestone payments or contingent value rights. So this is a paid as you prove it model. So, based off those payments or how that's structured right now, we want to make sure that those startups are understanding those evolving structures, help them negotiate terms that's going to balance risk and reward, and present any robust due diligence materials that's going to build buyer confidence.
Wonderful. Thank you very, very much. The next thing that I'm interested in talking about is partnering with companies. So what I would say is that there is a strong need for companies to actually have partnerships and letters of intent in order to show that they have proof of concept. So that being the case, I'm curious about how you think about that and how that works in terms of creating real good traction. Because for me, I love to see some traction. It doesn't really matter sometimes if they're making revenue right away, but it does matter if really great companies see value in what they're doing and are willing to put themselves on the line along with these particular startups and founders to work for a solution. So I would love it if you would talk a little bit about that. And Lindsey, if you would start, that would be really great.
Sure, happy to. I totally agree. I mean, having a strong, plan for going after partnerships is really important. I think one thing that we find is that a lot of times, founders, these are oftentimes small teams. You can't do everything yourself. You may not have a, huge commercial organization to support. So, utilizing partnerships and channel partners to really, build your business, show social proof, and then sometimes even just really Trojan horse into kind of those ultimate buyers is a great strategy. So we highly recommend that. One thing that we do a lot of is buyer interviews. So we have a panel of different advisors that for clients we can interview to really kind of identify the market opportunity for a new solution or a new product. And one thing that we recommend oftentimes is including partners in that process. So we can really identify what would be the best path forward for working with partners, what are going to be kind of the right types of partners for that organization. And then, helping companies also understand what the partners are going to be looking for. So, how you need to structure a successful partnership, what those agreements need to look like, what their incentives for them to be motivated to help you grow. But I think that that's a fantastic strategy that most companies are really looking for. I will say that in our space within the industry, relying on partnerships alone can be challenging. So we find that that's really kind of part of a broader plan where, you're leveraging partnerships, but you also have more of kind of a direct sales strategy as well to kind of engage other players within that same employer ecosystem.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. I would also like to pose the same question to you, Issa.
Yeah, absolutely. So, positioning startups to any sort of, letter of intent or strategic partnerships in a whole, it's a whole approach, very similar to what Lindsey mentioned before. We take this very stepwise approach to, the first way is we really want to identify the right partners. So we just start conducting deep dive analysis on the startup's technology, their clinical data, their market fit. Using that profile, we can pinpoint types of partners based off that client profile. So, be any health systems, payers, pharma, med tech players that are going to benefit from the startup solution. So once we have an idea on who to target, that's where we start crafting the value proposition with the startup.
I see.
It's very important for them to understand how they can, relate that information. How can potential partners see that it's more than just an interesting product? We want to make sure they understand how it solves specific challenges. So we want to make sure we can translate clinical efficacy, cost savings, workflow enhancements, patient experience improvements into something that's going to resonate with each of these prospective partners' priorities. So once we are able to have, the right identification on who this client profile might be, once we nail down the value proposition, we can start leveraging our data early validation. So, start securing hopefully smaller pilot programs or feasibility studies that's going to help generate preliminary real world data. So even though it's limited, small sample sizes, it's still almost a proof of concept. It's showing that there is social proof and it reduces perceived risk, which is going to promote partners to really formalize their interests, say that we're looking at an LOI. From there, there's a couple items that I think sometimes get overlooked at, and it's having a strategic introduction. It's being able to strategize and be able to how can we connect the founder to an appropriate person and at the right time. That's always a very significant portion of that. And then, of course, negotiating on their behalf as far as deal structuring on the strategic partnership end of it. And then, of course, lastly, I think just building that long-term connection and credibility with them really means something.
That's wonderful. So what I'm thinking now is that it would be amazing to have some questions from the audience. However, I have many, many questions that I'm still itching to ask you guys because this has been such a fantastic session. So I will allow for questions to be asked, but in the meantime, I am going to ask you a couple more questions. And one of them is about artificial intelligence. So we know that lately it is all of the buzz, but we also know that ML and AI have been around for over 20 years. There are rumors that the internet was created for AI that are out there even. So the ideation of what we are seeing today has been in the works for years and years. So how do you guys see yourselves in this sector? And then also, how do you see yourself helping founders who are thinking about integrating it, but need to integrate it in a way that makes sense for healthcare? Because healthcare is very different than other types of things where there needs to be a true authority who will take responsibility for, let's say, a diagnosis or for permission for a surgery or medication. So there are very, very stringent hurdles that AI has to overcome in order to be very well used. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And Issa, would you please start on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think this year especially has been like the year of AI, especially in any field that you could think of, consulting and startups and however you want to look at that. But what really is a differentiator is how we're going to be able to use it. How do we utilize it? Very similar to what you just mentioned, Anaya. I think that where we help startups position to leverage AI is by really understanding the unique strategic goals, the objectives of what they're trying to reach. Because we want to be able to help founders integrate AI in ways that's going to yield tangible value. That's, whether it's improving clinical outcomes, streamlining workflows, creating more personalized patient experiences. One of the hardest parts, I think, is understanding its high impact use cases. So this could be, well, how is AI going to drive the greatest return on the startup? So this could be accelerating drug discovery. In silico medicine right now, they have an AI drug that they are in phase 2A that's been wholly one of the first wholly AI designed drugs on the market right now. So we're seeing that there's advancements towards that. Another return or another potential high use case would be, predicting patient risk scores or optimizing treatment pathways. So we want to make sure that we can focus on those use cases that's going to directly address any bottlenecks. And then, go down the list, very similar to a lot of the questions you asked prior, and making sure that we're identifying the right strategic technology partner. We want to make sure that it's being integrated in an existing workflow. How can we proof of concept? How can we make sure that what this AI is doing is actually making this more operationally efficient? And at the end of the whole end of it is to make sure that we're demonstrating clinical and economic value through, of course, regulatory and ethical considerations being considered.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic because you know exactly what needs to happen going forward, and so being knowledgeable about this will allow you to help these founders not to make some of the mistakes that people tend to make when they add a buzzword to their companies. We don't want it to be a buzzword. We want it to be an actual help to the customer and also an actual help to their own workflow. And Lindsey, with that in mind, I would love to talk to you a little bit about that and your thoughts on it as well.
Sure. I think that you kind of nailed it whenever you said buzzword. So, it is a buzzword, and we work a lot with companies on really kind of their overall positioning to, primarily buyers, primarily within the employer world, but then also thinking through kind of their messaging to the patient as well. So, within kind of the employer space, it's very much a B2B2C buying environment. So obviously, the patient needs to see value from the ultimate product. And so, a lot of companies we work with have an AI component. I think I read that in the first half of this year, a third of companies that received funding that were digital health companies were AI enabled. So everybody has an AI component to what they do, or not everybody, but a large percentage of companies. But what is the meaningful value of that to the buyer? So to the employer, or, kind of whoever it is you're working with within that ecosystem, and then also to the patient. So we work with companies to kind of think through that strategy because, otherwise it could potentially hurt you as well. I think that people are still looking for personalized healthcare, for instance. So how do you kind of, use AI to bolster kind of your underlying capabilities as well? So I think that's important. And then within our business, we also, of course, use AI. We found that it can be helpful for, some of the market research work we do, certainly some of the marketing work we do. We have some of our sales processes that are utilizing AI. So a lot of companies that we'll work with, they'll be looking for to understand how they can better utilize that within their business for their processes from a sales and marketing perspective. So we can certainly kind of lend thoughts and insight from what we've been doing and kind of share, solutions that have worked well for us.
Thank you. That's really important. That's true. That is true. That is true. And I am looking forward to seeing some amazing companies that integrate AI into their offerings. But it's one of those things where we have to be very careful about it. And it's one of those things that I'm sure will change the world. It's already changing the world. But we have to make sure that we manage it in a way that it changes the world in a positive way. I will also ask you another question about staffing. So as a company grows, they may have a need for fractional help, or they may have a need for permanent help. And that could be in terms of having a C-suite individual join their team. Or it could be in terms of having just staff, like research staff, that can help them get through FDA approval etc. So I'd love for you guys to talk a little bit about that and how you help companies to find the right kind of staff to bolster and move their companies forward. I would love to start with you, Lindsey.
Sure. So, I mean, I think, there's been growing demand for fractional resources. There is so much fantastic talent that you can work with on a fractional basis. And I think that it's especially nice for earlier stage companies that, maybe can't afford or don't need the full-time talent. So I think that it's a fantastic option for a lot of different companies. They're looking for expertise in certain areas that they may not need on a full-time basis. We kind of position ourselves as a fractional commercial function for the employer audience. And really, if you think about it, typically you would need, a chief commercial officer, you would need a head of growth strategy, you would need a head of sales, you'd need a head of marketing, a head of sales operations, and then kind of the support functions underneath. So to get all of that, internally is going to be very expensive. It's a lot of people. It would really kind of blow your budget. So how can you leverage, other consultancies or fractional executives to bring that support? I think is really important. One thing that we've also heard a lot from companies is that, again, they want people that can not just think strategically, but also roll up their sleeves and do a lot of the work for them as well. Just in a world of of startups where you don't have the time and necessarily resources to do everything yourself. So I would encourage companies to generally look for more of a fractional team approach, or fractional leaders who can really again kind of roll up their sleeves and aren't just going to provide strategy and advice, but will actually help with kind of the implementation as well, so that you can get your company as far as possible.
That sounds fantastic. And I would like to also posit that question to you, Issa, as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I think, Lindsey hit a lot of good points there, especially on the fractional role there. What we'd like to do, like especially if we're working with a startup, we're going to identify, talent needs based on their immediate milestones. So, if they need help with navigating regulatory steps more than what a consultant can bring, that's where we'll probably have to leverage a, chief regulatory officer or chief medical officer. Or if they need help with fundraising, that's where we bring in someone with CFO experience or investor relations experience. So, every hire directly is going to support that core business objective. And, to relay again, the fractional versus full-time role, starting fractional, it really helps bridge those skill gaps during those critical growth stages for a startup. So of course, as this company matures and needs more intensity, and they need to intensify their commercialization efforts, their go-to-market efforts as well, that's probably where you'll start thinking about transitioning those roles into more permanent leadership positions. And a lot of what we like to do, since we have a pretty wide network, we want to make sure that we're tapping into our vetted pool, making sure that former biotech execs, medical officers, physicians, they've guided startups before, and they've seen those similar challenges, whether it's the same therapeutic that they've worked in or a certain medical device that they've worked on as far as product lines are concerned. So it really just helps speed up the hiring, ensuring there's credibility as well. And a big thing is cultural alignment. Lindsey really mentioned the part where rolling up your sleeves and doing what's needed to do. Not everyone can do that task. So being able to find that right skill who can align to that company's mission, their values, and making sure that there's a cohesive team dynamic, just to make it a lot more smoother, especially when there's going to be a lot of it's going to be a bumpy ride along the way in the startup's journey. So I want to make sure that they're all on the same page.
Wow, thank you. I love that. It's interesting. I'm coming to this point where I'm thinking about how the two of you would work together as advisors with a particular startup, sort of a passing of the baton, shall we say. So if you guys could talk a little bit about that, that would be fantastic. And I'm going to start with you, Issa, because I believe that you would come first in this particular process. So I would love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, absolutely. This definitely is a baton handoff. We definitely, since we really are shaping the strategic and regulatory trajectory of these, life science, health focused startups. So that's, including fine tuning their clinical and commercialization strategies, ensuring regulatory alignment, a lot of the back end things, preparing those companies for meaningful investor dialogues. So that's where, we're helping these founders crystallize their value proposition, refine their operational plan, structure milestones accordingly. That's going to sit well with investors, industry stakeholders. And then that's where, you would hand it off to Lindsey and Spark Health to where they can take on to the next inflection point.
All right. You've been tagged. Lindsey, you're in.
I have. Yeah, no, I agree with Issa. Like, I think that there could be a great baton handoff. So, as mentioned, he can do so many things. His firm can do so many things on the earlier side. We tend to work with companies, that have achieved product market fit. They have a product that they're ready to launch, and they are wanting to go after employers or at least explore that market. So typically what we do is we work with companies, if they haven't worked with employers yet, to kind of optimize those efforts over the course of 90 days. So we'd sit down with them to really figure out how they can maximize revenue from that channel. That also works, obviously, if you're an established company, you're already working with employers. Then we'd work on kind of how to position and differentiate in that space. So everything from kind of value proposition, what's the competitive landscape look like in that space, to like what's your pricing strategy as well. And then we would actually launch. So one of the things that we do that's maybe a little bit unique is we actually launch in the market where we're working with companies to actually build pipeline, improve their win rates, things along those lines, by supporting with sales and marketing activities. So we have a whole team and talent and playbooks to actually do that as well. So again, I think we become, once you kind of identified that the self-insured employer market is a space that you are interested in and you want to see if there's opportunity there, and then we would start to kind of do our work.
That's fantastic. And that being the case, it looks like we have run to the end of our time together. This has been fantastic. You've shared so many nuggets on how to approach consultancy within the healthcare venture space. And I hope that founders are able to grasp a lot of these different ideas on how to move forward and how not to get stuck in situations that your help could help them move out of, right? Not to feel paralyzed by all of the different problems that they are coming up against, but to realize that companies like Ambrosia Ventures and Spark Health Advisors can help get them not only out of a pit, but get them onto the mountaintop. So I'm so thankful to have both of you. Thank you, Lindsey, and thank you, Issa, for being here today. And I just wanted to ask you both to let people know where they can find you. So, Lindsey?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me today. It's been such a pleasure. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Lindsey Kratzer, Kratzer, or sparkhealthadvisors.com. That's our website. Always happy to talk to new folks.
Wonderful. And then also, Issa, I would like you to let people know how they can find you and where and how they can make use of your services as well.
Absolutely. And thank you again, Nana, for the opportunity to speak on your platform and to share insights with Lindsey. It was honestly a great experience. You could find me at LinkedIn with my name, Issa Kildani, or you can look up our company, Ambrosia Ventures. And you can also find us online at ambrosiaventures.co. We're more than happy to take any contact forms and love to chat with you to see how we can help you through that strategic landscape.
That's wonderful. Thank you very, very much. And it was my pleasure to host you. And I look forward to interacting with you and working with you in the near future. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you, everybody who joined us today. And those of you who will watch later, let us know what you think of this and how we can be helpful. feel free to reach out to us as well at Purelite Ventures. Bye-bye.
Yeah.